The president apparently exploding as he faces severe criticism for his Syria policy in addition to the impeachment investigation.
That's right, Wolf. The temperature in Washington seems to be going up precipitously as the pressure over impeachment and also the president's Syria policy seem to have combined at the White House today with explosive results. We have just gotten a response from the White House press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, to the way in which this meeting was characterized by Democrats. Here's what she said. She said the president was measured, factual, and decisive, while Speaker Pelosi's decision to walk out was baffling, but not surprising. But Democrats say this meeting went totally differently and it went off the rails when President Trump went after Speaker Nancy Pelosi in personal terms. Tonight, a White House meeting on Syria derailed hours after House Republicans joined Democrats to condemn his decision to withdraw troops from Syria.
He was shaken up by it, and that's why we couldn't continue in the meeting, because he was just not relating to the reality of it.
Democrats accusing President Trump of going off on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
He was insulting, particularly to the Speaker. She kept her cool completely, but he called her a third-rate politician. He said that there are communists involved and you guys might like that. I mean, this was not a dialogue. It was sort of a diatribe, a nasty diatribe, not focused on the facts.
Republicans pushing back.
Unfortunately, the Speaker tries to make everything political.
This as Trump continues to defend his moves to pull back from northern Syria, which paved the way for a deadly Turkish military operation in the region.
I'm not going to lose potentially thousands and tens of thousands of American soldiers fighting a war between Turkey and Syria. Syria is not our friend. Assad is not our friend.
Shortly before Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo leave for Turkey to broker a ceasefire, Trump seemed to parrot Turkish President Erdogan's talking points against the U.S.'s one-time allies, the Kurds.
I'm not going to get involved in a war between Turkey and Syria, especially when, if you look at the Kurds, and again, I say this with great respect, they're no angels. If you look at PKK, take a look at PKK. ISIS respects PKK. You know why? Because they're as tough or tougher than ISIS.
As the House Democrats' impeachment inquiry turns up the pressure on the White House, Trump is testing his Republican firewall in the Senate with his moves on Syria.
He's not listening to his commanders. He's not listening to his advisors. He's making the biggest mistake of his presidency by assuming the Kurds are better off today than they were yesterday. That is just unbelievable.
Trump firing back at one of his most loyal defenders, Senator Lindsey Graham.
No, Lindsey Graham would like to stay in the Middle East for the next 1,000 years with thousands of soldiers and fighting other people's wars. I want to get out of the Middle East. I think Lindsey should focus right now on judiciary, like the Democrats, the do-nothing Democrats.
The president also suggesting that U.S. troops in Syria are not in harm's way.
Our soldiers are out of there. Our soldiers are totally safe.
But just yesterday, a U.S. official told CNN that advancing Turkish forces put U.S. troops on the ground directly at risk. Tonight, Republicans no longer trying to hide their frustration.
Many of us have been arguing that this was a mistake. I want to express my gratitude to the Kurds. They were great fighters. We had a terrific alliance with them. I'm sorry that we are where we are.
And just moments ago, Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo boarded their plane to Turkey. They are headed there on a mission to stop the violence in northern Syria. But some of their job today was made a lot more difficult by President Trump's words, which echoed Turkey's President Erdogan. And we're also learning about a letter that President Trump sent to Erdogan, urging him to stop the violence. He says this in the letter: "Don't be a tough guy, don't be a fool." He says, "History will look upon you favorably if you get this done in the right and humane way." Wolf.
Abby Phillip at the White House, thank you. Now to the breaking news on the federal investigation of Rudy Giuliani and his business ties to Ukraine. Our political correspondent Sarah Murray is working this part of the story for us. What are you learning, Sarah?
Well, Wolf, we're learning there is a counterintelligence component to this investigation that's surrounding the president's personal attorney and his various associates who have been indicted. And we learned this when I spoke to this lawyer. His name is Kenneth McCallion, who said that FBI counterintelligence investigators approached him months ago, February or March, so much earlier, of course, than we learned of these indictments. And they were asking questions about Rudy Giuliani and his relationship and his business dealings with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. So this is interesting because it means that this investigation goes beyond just questions about this campaign finance scheme that Fruman and Lev Parnas were involved in. And it could potentially include questions about, whether Rudy Giuliani either wittingly or unwittingly was part of some kind of influence operation, some kind of effort from Ukrainians, Russians, perhaps others who may have been bankrolling this to get information in front of the president. And
yet another Rudy Giuliani associate was physically arrested today.
That's right. This is one of the men who was indicted, David Correa. He had not been taken into custody, but our colleagues Erica Orden and Kara Scannell, who are in New York, have been following this story today. He was apprehended this morning at JFK Airport in New York. He has since been released on a $250,000 bond. He has not entered a plea yet, but he is set to appear in court tomorrow. So we could potentially get more information.
Yeah, lots going on indeed. Good reporting, Sarah. Thank you very much. Now to the impeachment investigation and new testimony connected to the Ukraine scandal. Another key witness testified up on Capitol Hill today, a former senior advisor to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Let's go to our congressional correspondent, Sunlen Serfati. Sunlen, what are you learning about today's closed-door testimony?
Yeah, Wolf, more than 1 week after he abruptly resigned, Michael McKinley speaking to lawmakers for more than 5 hours behind closed doors today. And inside that room, he essentially outlined the concerns he had of what was going on behind the scenes within the State Department and the reasons that led to his abrupt departure last week. Sources telling CNN that he testified and told lawmakers today that he repeatedly urged Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to issue some sort of support of the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, someone who was criticized by President Trump, someone who was targeted by Rudy Giuliani, and someone who, of course, was recalled from her post earlier this year. And McKinley told the committee essentially that he pushed Pompeo to do this, and Pompeo remained silent, and that was one of the reasons that led to him to resign last week. Now, this just in the latest in a series of depositions that House Democrats have lined up for this week, including potentially a critical big moment tomorrow where Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU, he will be appearing on Capitol Hill. Of course, he was a central figure in those text messages that were released by the committee, talking about the withholding of military aid, talking about that July 25th phone call. So potentially a key testimony up here tomorrow. Wolf.